Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into quiet, sometimes restless nights of Victorian Britain, where you find yourself lying awake in a gaslit bedroom, the faint creak of heavy floorboards echoing through the dark. You tug your thick woolen blankets tighter, hoping for sleep to come, but your mind drifts instead to the never-ending worries of the day, social expectations, looming responsibilities, and perhaps a peculiar, almost obsessive rituals meant to lull you into rest. You probably wouldn't survive a Victorian sleepless night. Insomnia back then was as common as the clatter of teacups in a London parlor. And yet, they had their ways to coax sleep out of even the most stubborn minds, including some strange, almost charming remedies you might not expect. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're watching this from somewhere in the world, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love imagining the many clocks ticking away as we share this slow-paced journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Insomnia was no stranger to the Victorians. Contrary to the polished portraits and stiff manners, a surprisingly large portion of the population suffered from chronic sleeplessness. The pressures of an industrializing society, with its harsh work schedules, crowded cities, and unrelenting social codes, weighed heavily on minds already taxed by the rapid changes of the 19th century. You can almost feel the restlessness seeping to the fog-filled streets of London or the quiet villages where news of the latest medical advice trickled slowly. The invention of gas lighting extended the waking hours, illuminating bedrooms and parlors well past the natural sunset, inviting long nights where the mind simply refused to shut off. Sleep was more than a necessity. It was a cultural performance, a sign of proper living. You had to appear well-rested, even if you weren't, or risk whispers about nervousness, hysteria, or moral weakness. The term nervous exhaustion floated around like a fog, a catch-all diagnosis for many ailments, including insomnia. Rich or poor, sleeplessness affected many, but how you dealt with it varied greatly. Interestingly, historians still argue whether Victorian insomnia was driven more by societal stress or the physical effects of their lifestyle. Was it the candlelight flickering too late, or the anxiety of societal expectations? Maybe both. What we do know is that the Victorians took their nightly battles seriously and developed a range of rituals and remedies aimed at capturing elusive sleep. You might picture a Victorian bedtime scene with a heavy brass bed, layered quilts, and lace curtains, but beneath this cozy exterior lay a complex world of sleep practices. People relied on everything from warm drinks and herbal mixtures to soft music and bedtime stories, each meant to cradle the restless mind. On any given evening, the housewife might pour warm milk infused with a pinch of nutmeg or lavender. The child's nursery might be filled with gentle lullabies played softly on the pianoforte, and gentlemen might settle into armchairs with books that slowly led their thoughts away from daily worries. One curious detail often missed is how pervasive the idea of sleep hygiene was becoming, even if not by that name. The Victorian middle and upper classes were beginning to understand that environment and routine mattered. Some would use night curtains to block out drafts. Others preferred dim lighting from shaded lamps or night lights, while few went so far as to use early versions of sound-blocking techniques to hush the noises of a bustling city outside. And then there was the social ritual of the nightcap or the late evening tea, each believed to either help or hinder the quest for sleep, depending on who you asked. But perhaps the most iconic symbol of Victorian sleep remedies was that humble glass of warm milk. Simple, soothing, and steeped in both tradition and emerging science, it was a go-to comfort for many a restless soul. It's fascinating to imagine yourself in a Victorian parlor, sitting quietly as the household prepares for night. The crackle of the fireplace, the distant toll of a church bell, and the careful pouring of milk warmed over the hearth. All subtle signals that the day's chaos is drawing to a close. You might even hear a soft piano melody in the background, a tune known to ease the mind and prepare it for rest. These nights were long, and the journey to sleep was often anything but straightforward. Yet, the Victorians persisted with gentle remedies, weaving a tapestry of habits and beliefs that still echo faintly in our modern bedtime rituals. So, as you settle in tonight, remember, those warm, milky sips and soft melodies have a long, comforting history behind them. And if sleep still feels distant, you're in good company. Warm milk. Such a simple phrase, yet it carries the weight of centuries, much like a favorite childhood blanket folded carefully on the foot of your bed. Tonight, as you imagine that gentle warmth sliding down your throat, know that you're tapping into a tradition with deep roots, tangled in both folklore and the rise of Victorian medical thinking. The idea that warm milk can lull you to sleep wasn't plucked from thin air. It emerged from a curious blend of old wives' tales, scientific theories in their infancy, and practical wisdom passed quietly from mother to child. The custom of drinking warm milk before bed predates Victorian England by centuries, stretching back to classical antiquity where it was often recommended as a remedy for restlessness. But it was in the 19th century that this humble drink truly embedded itself into the fabric of bedtime routines. You can almost picture a Victorian kitchen, a ceramic pot gently simmering on the stove, the smell of toasted bread mingling with that faintly sweet scent of warm milk. The ritual was as much about calming the mind as it was about nourishing the body. Warm milk was believed to contain sleep-inducing properties, thanks largely to its tryptophan content, a precursor to serotonin and melatonin, neurotransmitters that help regulate mood and the sleep-wake cycle. While modern science confirms some of this, historians still debate how much Victorian people understood about the biochemical underpinnings versus how much was faith in tradition. After all, the 19th century was a period when medicine teetered between empirical science and charming superstition. Some Victorian health manuals suggested spicing the milk with nutmeg, cinnamon, or even a dash of honey, ingredients thought to enhance its calming effect. Nutmeg, in particular, had a curious reputation. Small amounts were said to soothe nerves, but too much could lead to hallucinations. So, if you imagine the careful hand of a Victorian mother adding just a pinch, you might also picture the mild anxiety about overdoing it, like seasoning a story just right. Interestingly, warm milk's reputation wasn't just a matter of chemistry. Its association with childhood innocence and comfort likely played a psychological role in soothing insomniacs. Drinking a warm, familiar beverage can provide a ritualistic signal to the brain that the day is ending, encouraging relaxation. Some scholars suggest that this ritualized behavior may have been just as important, if not more so, than the milk's biochemical effects. Beyond the parlor and nursery, warm milk served as a social marker, too. Wealthier households might have the luxury of fresh milk delivered daily, while rural or poorer families relied on preserved or powdered forms. This created a subtle class distinction in who could partake in this bedtime luxury, a detail that colors how we view Victorian sleep culture. You might find it amusing that, in some circles, milk was even considered a mild medicine. Pharmacists stocked sleep powders and tonics to mix with warm milk, concoctions often containing opiates or valerian root. While these additives aim to enhance sleep, they also reveal how Victorian remedies often dance on the edge between gentle care and risky experimentation. Historians still argue whether warm milk's popularity was driven more by its physical properties or by the comforting rituals it inspired. Was it the milk itself, or the act of slowing down and savoring a quiet moment before bed? Perhaps both were at play, weaving together into a nightly balm against restless minds. So next time you sip your warm milk, or even just imagine it, remember you're partaking in a centuries-old tradition. A tradition that links you softly to those Victorian nights when the glow of candlelight and the promise of sleep were held in the humble cup cradled in your hands. As the steam curls lazily from that warm milk in your hand, imagine the soft strains of pianoforte filling the room, a delicate melody winding its way through the air, soothing and steady. Victorian music wasn't just entertainment. It was an essential part of the bedtime ritual, a gentle auditory hug designed to ease the mind into restfulness. Picture yourself reclining in a parlor, perhaps draped in a cozy shawl, as a family member's fingers dance across ivory keys, or a quiet lullaby hums in a child's nursery. This wasn't background noise. It was carefully chosen, a balm for restless nerves. In Victorian homes, music occupied a significant role, especially among the middle and upper classes. Parlors with hard domestic social life, and evenings often included a mix of casual gatherings, storytelling, and music-making. Yet as the night deepened, the focus shifted toward relaxation. Slow, melodic pieces, often in a minor key, were favored to calm the senses. You might hear works by Chopin or Mendelssohn, or simpler, traditional lullabies passed down through generations. Historians still argue whether music's calming effect was primarily psychological or physiological, but there's no denying its presence in Victorian sleep culture. Gentle rhythms and familiar melodies created a predictable pattern that the brain could latch onto, a sonic anchor in the dark. Music for sleep wasn't limited to the drawing room. Children's bedtime routines often included lullabies, sung softly by mothers or nurses. These songs, simple and repetitive, were designed to mimic the soothing rhythm of a heartbeat or the rocking motion of a cradle. You can almost feel the quiet intimacy in those moments, where the worries of the day melted away beneath the soft cadence of, "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Interestingly, some Victorian families invested in mechanical music boxes, delicate devices that played tiny, tinkling tunes. These were considered especially helpful for children who resisted sleep. Imagine the faint, almost magical sound filling a nursery, mixing with the scent of lavender and the warmth of a parent's embrace. Beyond domestic settings, music also found a place in Victorian hospitals and sanatoriums, where doctors experimented with music therapy to treat nervous disorders, including insomnia. The idea that sound could influence the body's rhythms was gaining traction, and some patients were prescribed listening sessions to slow their racing thoughts. Of course, not all music was created equal in the eyes of Victorian society. Lively, upbeat dances or dramatic operatic arias were generally discouraged near bedtime, thought to excite rather than relax. Instead, slow waltzes, soft hymns, or instrumental pieces dominated the evening repertoire. Even popular parlor songs often had versions arranged for gentle, soothing play. You might smile to know that some Victorians went to great lengths to create the perfect acoustic environment. Rooms were designed to minimize echoes and harsh sounds, while heavy curtains and carpets muffled street noise. The careful curation of sound was as deliberate as the choice of warm milk or herbal tea. And then there's the curious detail that certain lullabies were believed to carry healing properties. Some tunes were said to chase away bad dreams or calm night terrors, an early acknowledgement of music's emotional power. Whether this was true or not remains a topic scholars debate, but adds a layer of mystery to the bedtime melodies. So as you listen now, maybe with soft music playing in the background or the hum of your own room, remember the Victorian tradition of lullabies and parlor tunes. The idea that sleep is not just a physical need but a sensory experience, woven from sights, smells, tastes, and, importantly, sounds. With warm milk warming your insides and music soothing your ears, you're gently carried toward the threshold of dreams, much like countless Victorian souls before you. The candlelight flickers softly as you sink deeper into your cozy bed, but sleep remains just out of reach. You wonder why this restlessness has taken hold, and in the 19th century, doctors would have a few theories ready for you, some rooted in science, others in the mysteries of the mind and body. Victorian medical thinking on insomnia was a curious blend of emerging physiological understanding and long-held beliefs that sometimes seem, well, quaint to modern eyes. By this time, physicians were beginning to view sleeplessness not just as a mere inconvenience, but as a symptom of deeper ailments, nervous exhaustion, melancholia, or even imbalances of the humors, those ancient bodily fluids once thought to govern health. You might hear a doctor prescribe quietude, fresh air, or a strict regimen, often accompanied by recommendations to avoid stimulating activities or heavy meals before bedtime. Interestingly, some Victorian doctors thought that the very act of worrying about insomnia could worsen condition, a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. This led to advice that, if you couldn't sleep, it was better get up and engage in a quiet, distracting activity rather than lie awake stewing. Imagine being gently urged to sew, read, or stroll the garden at night, all in hopes of easing your troubled mind. At the same time, many still believe in the power of nervous energy and the need to calm the body through sedatives, which range from harmless herbal tinctures to stronger concoctions containing opiates or chloral hydrate, the latter becoming popular toward the century's end. Historians still argue whether these early pharmaceuticals did more good or harm, as addiction and side effects were not well understood. One fringe yet fascinating idea was that insomnia might be linked to poor digestion or overheated blood, leading to a slew of dietary prescriptions aimed at cooling the body. This tied neatly into the warm milk tradition, which was believed to soothe the stomach and cool internal fires. The overlap between diet, digestion, and sleep was a subject of much Victorian medical speculation. You might be amused to learn that some doctors also cautioned against excessive reading or emotional excitement before bed, advice not too far off from modern sleep hygiene. It turns out that blue light and adrenaline aren't just 21st century enemies of sleep. As the century progressed, a more scientific approach to insomnia took shape, incorporating ideas about the nervous system and brain activity. Still, the Victorian era was a liminal space between old remedies and new science, where superstition and evidence often mingled. Some physicians even suggested that insomnia could be hereditary or linked to the seasons. Winter months, with their longer nights and heavier atmospheres, were often blamed for restless sleep. And then there were societal implications. Sleeplessness was sometimes seen as a moral failing, an inability to rest the mind properly. Women, in particular, were often diagnosed with hysteria or nervousness, conditions thought to sap sleep and vitality. The gender nature of insomnia diagnoses reveals much about Victorian anxieties and the social context of health. So here you are, caught between the flicker of the gas lamp and the swirling theories of Victorian doctors, each with their own explanation for why sleep eludes you. Whether it was nerves, diet, digestion, or moral weakness, the quest for rest was a shared human struggle. Sleep, after all, remained as elusive then as it can feel tonight, a delicate dance of body, mind, and environment, one that Victorians approached with a blend of hope, science, and a touch of superstition. The night deepens, and as you cradle your warm milk, consider the other popular companion vying for your attention, the nightcap. In Victorian times, the term nightcap didn't just mean one last drink before bed. It was a full ritual, a quiet ceremony meant to ease the transition from wakefulness to sleep. While warm milk held its place as a gentle, soothing potion, many also turned to alcoholic beverages to calm their nerves and coax drowsiness. But how did these different drinks compete for your favor? Wine, whiskey, and brandy were common choices, especially among gentlemen and those who preferred a stronger nudge towards slumber. Some believed a small amount of alcohol could dull the mind's edge, smoothing over the anxieties and restlessness that kept one awake. It was common to find a glass of port or sherry waiting on a bedside table, its amber glow catching the light of a bedside lamp. Yet, the relationship between alcohol and sleep was complicated even then. While a nightcap might help you fall asleep faster, it often disrupted the deeper stages of sleep, leaving you tired and unrest come morning. Some Victorian physicians warned against excessive drinking before bed, but the social allure of the nightcap was hard to resist. You can almost hear the clink of glasses in a dimly lit study, the murmured toast to health and rest. Warm milk, on the other hand, was championed as a purer, more wholesome alternative. It fit neatly within Victorian ideals of moderation and self-control, qualities highly prized in the era's moral code. Mothers gave it to children, wives prepared it for husbands, and the well-to-do enjoyed it as a nightly indulgence free from the potential pitfalls of alcohol. Some even combined the two, adding a splash of brandy or sherry to warm milk, to create a comforting hybrid drink. This concoction attempted to marry the soothing qualities of milk with the sedative effects of alcohol. You might find yourself pondering such a curious mix, perhaps hesitant but intrigued by its promise of sweet dreams. Beyond the drinks themselves, the act of sipping something warm was a ritual of winding down, whether it was milk or spirits. The pause, the focus on a comforting flavor, and the warmth flooding through your body all sent signals to your brain that it was time to rest. Interestingly, historians still debate how widespread the warm milk tradition actually was among different social classes. While the nightcap of wine or whiskey was more visible in literature and diaries, the humble glass of warm milk quietly served many, especially children and the infirm. This contrast illustrates the complex social dynamics surrounding sleep aids in Victorian society. And let's not forget the odd warnings from some Victorian guides cautioning against certain nightcaps. For example, too much whiskey might cause night terrors, while excessive sweet wines were said to provoke indigestion, both offenders in the battle for a peaceful sleep. As you settle deeper, perhaps with a warm drink in hand, consider how these nighttime beverages shaped the rhythm of Victorian rest. Whether it was a gentle milk, the spirited nightcap, or some combination of both, Each sip carried a hope for dreams, for rest, and for waking refreshed. So, next time you pour a warm drink before bed, you're continuing a centuries-old conversation between body, mind, and tradition, a conversation as delicate and comforting as the night itself. As your eyelids begin their slow descent, imagine the cozy confines of Victorian apothecary, a small shop filled with a fragrant scent of herbs, spices, and mysterious tinctures. Beyond the familiar warm milk and nightcaps, Victorians turned to a treasure trove of botanical remedies to calm restless minds and ease the grip of insomnia. The shelves creaked under the weight of dried chamomile, valerian root, lavender, and other botanical allies in the gentle war against sleeplessness. Herbs were no mere superstition. They formed a core part of Victorian medical thought, sitting comfortably alongside emerging pharmaceutical advances. Chamomile tea, for instance, was widely consumed for its mild sedative effects, its sweet, apple-like aroma inviting you to relax with every sip. Picture yourself wrapping your hands around a delicate china cup, inhaling the soothing steam as you prepare for sleep. Valerian root, often referred to as nature's Valium, was another staple. Its earthy scent might not have been everyone's liking, but it was prized for its ability to quiet nerves and reduce anxiety. Some Victorian health guides recommended valerian tinctures taken before bedtime, especially for those suffering from nervous disorders or chronic restlessness. Lavender was more than just a fragrant herb tucked into sachets and pillows. Its essential oil was used in various preparations, from calming baths to sprays on linens. The soft, floral scent was believed to promote relaxation and fend off bad dreams, a belief that lingers even today. You might be intrigued to learn about less common botanicals like hops, usually famous for their role in beer making, but also valued for their sedative properties. Hops pillows, small sacks filled with dried hops, were placed under pillows or mattresses to help induce sleep, a curious detail that hints at the Victorian desire to integrate soothing scents into the very fabric of sleep. Historians still debate the efficacy of some of these herbal remedies, as rigorous scientific studies were lacking, but their widespread use speaks to a collective belief in nature's power to heal. More importantly, these botanical rituals offer a moment of calm, a deliberate pause from the day's stresses. Apothecaries often compounded mixtures tailored to individual needs, blending herbs with other ingredients like honey, lemon, or even small amount of alcohol to enhance their effects. You can imagine the careful measuring and stirring behind the counter, each concoction a personalized hope for rest. Some Victorian families grew their own sleep-promoting herbs in small kitchen gardens or window boxes, tending them lovingly as part of their nightly preparations. This intimate relationship with nature was both practical and symbolic, a quiet nod to the healing powers of the earth. And here's a quirky Victorian twist. Some remedies include the use of tincture of serpentaria, an herbal extract believed to relieve nervousness and promote sleep, though it was more famous for its role in treating snake bites. The overlap between folklore, herbal medicine, and Victorian pharmacology was often delightfully tangled. As you picture these soothing herbs steeping in boiling water, their scents mingling in a steamy kitchen, remember that these botanical comforts were more than just medicine. They were part of a comforting routine, a sensory ritual inviting the body to slow down and surrender to sleep. So as your mind drifts toward dreams, imagine a Victorian home alive with the subtle aromas of chamomile and lavender, a world where nature's quiet helpers gently guided restless souls into peaceful rest. The soft glow of candlelight filters through a curtained window as you imagine yourself in a Victorian hospital ward, where the scent of lavender mingles faintly with antiseptic. Beyond the homey comforts of warm milk and lullabies, some Victorian doctors began exploring music's potential as a therapeutic tool for insomnia and nervous disorders within institutional walls. This experimental use of music therapy was an intriguing development in the 19th century, reflecting a growing belief in the mind-body connection. Hospitals of the era were often grim places, with harsh lighting and stark walls. However, a few forward-thinking physicians introduced soothing sounds to ease their patients' restlessness. Soft piano melodies, harp music, or even gentle humming were employed in some wards to calm nerves and slow racing thoughts, a primitive but earnest attempt to harness the power of sound for healing. Imagine lying in a high-backed iron bed, the muffled strains of a violin drifting down the corridor, blending with the steady rhythm of your breathing. These early music therapy sessions were sometimes guided by nurses or musicians employed by the hospital, who carefully chose pieces intended to reduce anxiety and encourage sleep. Interestingly, some hospitals also experiment with live singing as a form of therapy, believing that the human voice carried healing vibrations. Patients might gather for group sing-alongs during the day to build community, then listen to soft vocal pieces as night approached. These practices were precursors to modern music therapy, a field that still debates the precise mechanisms by which music affects mood and physiology. You might find it curious that music's therapeutic use was not universally accepted. Some critics dismissed it as frivolous or ineffective, while others embraced it as a valuable adjunct to conventional treatments. Historians still argue about how widespread and successful these early experiments truly were. Moreover, music therapy was often reserved for wealthier or long-term patients, reflecting class-based access to comfort and innovation. The poor and overcrowded hospitals rarely enjoyed such luxuries, a reminder of the era's stark inequalities. This institutional use of music complemented the home practices we've already explored, underscoring the Victorians' growing recognition that insomnia was not just physical but psychological. The gentle sounds aimed to soothe the restless mind much like a lullaby comforts a child. As you imagine this scene, the mingling scents, soft sounds, and dim lighting, you can appreciate the beginnings of a holistic approach to sleep, one that acknowledges the interplay between environment, emotion, and health. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember those early hospital wards where music quietly battled insomnia, a subtle but hopeful harmony in the Victorian struggle for rest. You settle back into your bed, pulling the heavy quilt just so, and imagine the careful choreography of Victorian bedroom rituals designed to usher you gently into sleep. This was an era when the environment mattered deeply. Lighting, bedding, temperature, and even the arrangement of furniture all played roles in the delicate dance toward rest. The Victorians took their bedtime routine seriously, perhaps more seriously than we do today, believing that the right conditions could make all the difference between a night of tossing and turning and a peaceful slumber. One of the first considerations was lighting. Gas lamps and candle provided a soft, flickering glow, often dimmed or shaded to reduce harshness. Too much brightness was thought to excite the nerves. So many households invested in lampshades, tinted glass, or even used red glass globes, which cast a calming hue. You might picture yourself lying in a softly lit room, shadows dancing lightly on wallpaper patterned with floral motifs, the atmosphere quiet and cocooning. Beds themselves were often heavy and ornate, with tall posts draped in thick curtains. These curtains were more than decorative. They helped block drafts, muffled noise, and created a private sanctuary within the room. You might remember that old crocodile dung sunscreen we discussed. That's the kind of Victorian attention to detail. Except here, it's about guarding your sleep from the chill and clatter of the outside world. Bedding was layered and warm, essential in drafty Victorian homes where central heating was rare. Feather mattresses, down comforters, and woolen blankets provided insulation, while bed socks and nightcaps were common to keep extremities cozy. It's easy to imagine how these tactile comforts helped signal your body that night had arrived. Temperature control was another focus. Open windows were common to let in fresh air, but only if the draft could be managed. Some beds had heated bricks or hot water bottles nestled near the feet, an early attempt at temperature regulation. Historians still debate how effective these measures were, and whether they sometimes cause overheating or discomfort. Even the time of going to bed was ritualized. Early to bed and early to rise was a familiar maxim, though Victorian nightlife sometimes extended late into the evening. Establishing a consistent bedtime was seen as vital for health, a principle that resonates with modern sleep hygiene. Many also engage in pre-sleep rituals, reading quietly by lamplight, practicing gentle prayers or meditations, or taking warm baths infused with calming herbs. Baths, in particular, were believed to relax muscles and soothe the mind, a practice that carried the scent of lavender, rosemary, or rose petals. A curious Victorian bedtime custom involved placing a sprig of certain plants, like hops or lavender, under the pillow, intended to bring sweet dreams or ward off nightmares. You can almost sense the faint herbal fragrance mingling with the heavy drapes and polished wood of the room. Social expectations also shaped these rituals. Proper sleep was a mark of moral and physical health. So maintaining a bedroom environment conducive to rest was both a personal and societal responsibility. Neglecting these rituals could invite not just insomnia, but social judgment. So as you feel the weight of your blankets and the softness of your pillow tonight, remember the Victorian belief that sleep was not just a biological necessity, but a carefully cultivated art, a nightly ceremony of comfort, calm, and sanctuary. You're snug under the covers now, and it's time to consider how social standing influenced the fight against insomnia in Victorian Britain. Sleep remedies like warm milk, soothing music, or herbal concoctions might sound universally comforting, but the reality was more complicated. Access to these aids and the environments that fostered restful sleep varied dramatically depending on wealth and class, weaving a quiet but profound divide in the nightly experiences of Victorians. Imagine the grand homes of the upper classes. Spacious bedrooms with plush furnishings, heavy curtains to block drafts and street noise, dedicated musicians playing gentle lullabies, and servants preparing warm drinks with fine ingredients. These households could afford fresh milk delivered daily, fine linen scented with lavender, and even the luxury of hot water bottles or heated bricks to stave off chill nights. The wealthy also had the leisure to engage in lengthy bedtime rituals, with quiet reading or music that gently ease them into sleep. Contrast this with the cramped, often overcrowded conditions of the working classes. In urban slums, families shared small rooms with limited ventilation and poor heating, often with several people sleeping in close quarters. Fresh milk was a rare treat. Often, what was available was boiled or powdered milk of varying quality. Music was more likely to be the street sounds outside or the chatter of neighbors than a carefully curated lullaby. Historians still debate to what extent the social disparity influenced health outcomes, including sleep quality. Some argue that lack of resources and noisy, uncomfortable environments contributed to chronic insomnia among the poor. Others suggest that strong community bonds and shared routines might have offered emotional comfort that partially offset physical discomfort. Interestingly, the middle classes occupied a curious middle ground. They aspired to emulate upper-class sleep hygiene, but often lacked the means to do so fully. Books and magazines offered advice on creating restful bedrooms, promoting herbal remedies, and maintaining regular routines. For these families, warm milk might be supplemented with homegrown herbs, and music was often amateur, played on an inexpensive pianoforte or sung by family members. You might smile at the notion that even with limited means, Victorians of all classes tried to carve out peaceful moments. Working-class families often relied on strong tea or bread and butter as bedtime staples, sometimes substituting herbal teas made from readily available plants. They also employed folk remedies, passed down through generations, reflecting a rich cultural tapestry of sleep practices. The economic divide extended to medical care, too. While wealthier Victorians could consult physicians and pharmacists for tailored sleep aids, poorer individuals often depended on local healers or self-treatment. The rise of commercial patent medicines promised affordable solutions, but these were hit or miss and sometimes dangerous. So as you nestle into your own sleep space tonight, consider the layers of privilege and ingenuity that shape how people rest. The quest for sleep transcends class, but is undeniably influenced by it, a quiet reminder that comfort and calm have long been luxuries as much as necessities. Remember, those warm sips of milk or the soft strains of music come wrapped in centuries of social history, marking the intimate connection between body, mind, and society. You might think Victorian sleep remedies were all gentle and refined, but hidden beneath the calm surface were some rather quirky and curious practices that might raise an eyebrow or two tonight. As you settle under your blankets, imagine the bizarre inventions and eccentric rituals Victorians tried in their pursuit of restful slumber, some charmingly inventive, others a bit peculiar by today's standards. One such oddity was the use of early sleep masks, though not quite like the silky eye covers we know now. Some Victorians fashioned makeshift masks from thin fabric or lace, hoping to block out light and encourage deeper rest. However, these were often elaborate and delicate, more ornamental than practical, sometimes tied with ribbons that might loosen or come undone in the night. The thought of a heavily dressed Victorian struggling to keep their lace mask in place in a drafty bedroom is oddly endearing. Then there were the mechanical sound machines of the era, though not electronic, of course. Some households employ devices like music boxes or small wind instruments that produce repetitive, soothing sounds thought to lull sleepers. These contraptions aim to mask unpleasant noises like street traffic or noisy neighbors, though how effective they were is debatable. Imagine the faint ticking of gears and soft chiming filling the air, creating a kind of Victorian white noise. A particularly curious practice involved the use of sleeping tents or bed canopies designed to create a cocoon of warmth and silence. While curtains around the bed were common, some went further, erecting fabric enclosures that could block drafts and muffle sounds. It's easy to picture these as small, intimate sanctuaries within the room, but they also raise the risk of stuffiness or poor ventilation, a trade-off between comfort and fresh air. Another eccentric remedy was the placement of small bags of herbs like hops or lavender not just under pillows, but also sewn into nightshirts or tucked inside bedding. The belief was that these scents could influence dreams or protect against night spirits, a nod to lingering folklore mingled with Victorian rationalism. You may chuckle at reports of sleep baths, where people soaked in tubs filled with warm water, infused with herbs, and even small amount of alcohol, designed to relax muscles and calm nerves. While luxurious for some, this practice wasn't accessible to everyone, and sometimes led to unintended chills if the bathwater cooled too quickly. Historians still debate the efficacy and prevalence of these curious methods. Were they widespread or limited to the eccentric few? Did they truly help, or were they comforted by hope and tradition? The evidence is murky, but these quirks offer a charming glimpse into the Victorian imagination's creative responses to a universal problem. You might also be amused to hear that some early sleep aids were marketed with extravagant claims, promising miraculous rest or dreamless nights, often with little scientific backing. These patent medicines and gadgets highlight the Victorian appetite for innovation, and perhaps a bit of desperation, in the quest for sleep. So as you nestle under your covers, take a moment to appreciate the curious tapestry of Victorian sleep culture, a blend of science, superstition, and whimsy that reminds us how human and hopeful our quest for rest truly is. You're sinking deeper into your blankets now, and it's time to meet some of the famous Victorian insomniacs who, despite, or perhaps because of their restless nights, left a mark on history. Imagine yourself slipping into the private chambers of writers, artists, and thinkers whose sleeplessness shaped their creativity, habits, and sometimes their health. Their struggles with sleep remind us that even in the age of gaslight and quiet parlors, insomnia was a universal companion. Take Charles Dickens, for example, whose bursts of midnight energy often fueled his prolific writing, but also left him exhausted. Dickens reportedly suffered from bouts of insomnia and would rise in the small hours to write by candlelight. His nightly routine involved walking the streets of London, sometimes through fog and silence, as a way to channel his restless mind. You can almost hear the echo of his footsteps on cobblestones, the city's muted sounds mixing with the turning of his thoughts. Then there's Florence Nightingale, who experienced chronic insomnia, especially after the traumatic experiences of the Crimean War. Her restless nights were marked by worries and intense planning, a mind too active to settle into rest. Nightingale's struggles remind us how psychological stress, long before modern psychology, was recognized as a significant factor in sleeplessness. Oscar Wilde, famous for his wit and flamboyance, also battled insomnia. His late-night musings and bouts of anxiety reportedly kept him awake, yet he often embraced the quiet solitude of the night as a time for creativity and reflection. Wilde's insomnia was intertwined with his lifestyle, marked by social pressure and personal struggles. Historians still argue whether these notable figures' insomnia was a cause or symptom of their genius and turmoil. Did their sleepless nights fuel their creativity, or did the demands of their minds and society rob them of needed rest? Perhaps it was a complex dance of both. You might find it comforting that these well-known personalities shared your nighttime battles, often developing unique routines. Dickens's midnight walks, Nightingale's note-taking by lamplight, and Wilde's nocturnal reflections all exemplify how Victorians adapted to their restless minds. Their stories also highlight the era's blend of fascination and frustration with insomnia. While some embrace the night's silence as fertile ground for thought, others long desperately for rest and relief. So as you drift towards sleep tonight, think of these restless souls, Writers, reformers, and artists who walk the delicate line between wakefulness and dreams, their sleeplessness both a burden and a muse. The quiet hours stretch on, and as you nestle beneath your blankets, it's worth pondering the psychological toll Victorian sleeplessness took on daily life. Insomnia wasn't just a physical inconvenience. It crept into minds and hearts, coloring moods, straining relationships, and sometimes casting long shadows over one's very sense of self. Imagine the slow unraveling of patience, the creeping irritability, the foggy mornings where the day begins before the night has fully released its grip. Victorian society had an acute awareness of the mind-body connection, even if the language was different. Nervous exhaustion was a common diagnosis, encompassing what we might now call anxiety or depression alongside insomnia. Sleepless nights fed this cycle. Lack of rest heightened nervous tension, which in turn kept people awake. It was a cruel, spinning wheel. Yet, the experience of insomnia was deeply personal and varied. For some, it was a passing affliction. For others, a chronic burden. Victorian literature and personal diaries reveal a spectrum of responses, from resigned acceptance to desperate attempts at relief. You might imagine the lonely figures of a well-to-do lady in a lace-trimmed nightgown, staring at the ceiling, or a factory worker trying to catch a few precious moments of rest before the day's labor. Historians still argue how much Victorian insomnia affected productivity and mental health broadly. Some suggest that the era's pace and pressures exacerbated psychological strain, while others highlight resilience and coping mechanisms built into social life. Sleep deprivation was linked to reduced cognitive function, increased irritability, and even physical illness, a vicious circle with few easy escapes. Medical advice frequently emphasized rest and moderation, yet the social and economic demands often made these luxuries unattainable. On a gentler note, some Victorians turned to spiritual or religious practices for solace. Prayer, meditation, and faith offered comfort against the anxiety that accompanied sleeplessness. You can almost hear whispered prayers in the stillness, the soft rustling of rosary beads, or the silent repetition of comforting verses. It's also interesting that the era grappled with what we now call sleep disorders, though the terminology and understanding were limited. Some individuals suffered from night terrors or hysteria, terms that reflected both medical and cultural attempts to categorize distressing nighttime experiences. You might find it soothing to know that despite these struggles, many Victorians found moments of peace and solace in their routines and remedies. Warm milk, calming music, gentle herbs, small anchors in turbulent seas. As you breathe slowly tonight, allow yourself that same gentle kindness. Insomnia may visit, but it does not define you. Rest is a process, a delicate balance of body and mind, shaped by countless factors, some within, some beyond control. And so, with that thought, feel your body soften, your mind quiet, and your heart settle, inviting the calm of sleep to fold around you. As the night deepens and your breathing slows, imagine the cozy nursery of a Victorian child, where the bedtime ritual is not just about physical rest, but emotional comfort. Lullabies and bedtime stories were essential threads woven into the fabric of childhood sleep, gentle voices and familiar tales cradling young minds as they drifted toward dreams. These traditions were cherished not only for their soothing qualities, but also for their role in shaping early notions of security and love. Victorian lullabies were often simple and repetitive, with melodies designed to mimic the calming rhythm of a mother's heartbeat or the rocking motion of a cradle. Songs like Hush, Little Baby or Rock-a-Bye Baby were sung softly, sometimes accompanied by a gentle rocking or stroking of the child's hair. The tender voices and familiar words created a predictable, comforting pattern that helped children transition from wakefulness to sleep. Bedtime stories also played a crucial role, with fairy tales, moral lessons, and gentle fables told in soft tones. These stories often carried themes of kindness, bravery, or caution, shaping young imaginations while easing the anxieties of the day. You can picture a parent or nurse sitting beside a dimly lit crib or small bed, their voice weaving tales that transport the child to distant lands or magical forests. Historians still debate how much these lullabies and stories influence children's sleep quality versus their emotional development, but there's little doubt about their importance in creating a peaceful bedtime atmosphere. Interestingly, Some Victorian lullabies included warnings or gentle moral instruction, a reflection of the era's values. For example, some songs advised children behave or warn against dangers lurking in dreams. This blend of comfort and caution was typical of Victorian parenting. Musical instruments like small pianofortes or music boxes were common in nurseries, providing soft background melodies. The use of music boxes was particularly popular, as their repetitive, tinkling sounds could lull children who resisted sleep. The sensory environment was carefully curated. Soft linens, night lights casting gentle shadows, and sometimes a subtle scent of lavender or chamomile in the air. These elements combine to create a multisensory cocoon, wrapping children in calm. You might smile at the thought that many of these practices, lullabies, bedtime stories, and soothing scents, remain staples in modern parenting, testifying to their enduring power. So, as you listen now, perhaps recalling a lullaby from your own childhood or the stories whispered to you long ago, allow yourself to be cradled by the gentle rhythm of Victorian bedtime traditions, a soothing echo from the past. As you begin to feel sleep's gentle tug, imagine the shifting landscape of sleep remedies as Victorian customs slowly gave way to early 20th century innovations. The transition wasn't abrupt but a gradual blending of tradition and emerging science, where warm milk and lullabies met new pharmaceuticals, electric lighting, and expanding medical knowledge. This crossroads marked a pivotal moment in how societies understood and treated insomnia. The early 1900s brought advances in pharmacology, including the introduction of hypnotics and sedatives like chloral hydrate and barbiturates. These drugs promised quicker relief for sleeplessness, though their risks weren't yet fully understood. You might picture Victorian doctors' neatly ordered shelves slowly filling with glass bottles, labeled with these new chemicals, an uneasy balance between hope and caution. Meanwhile, the continued electrification of homes altered nighttime environments profoundly. Electric lights replaced gas lamps and candles, offering steadier illumination but also extending waking hours, sometimes to the detriment of natural sleep cycles. This development sparked debates about light pollution's impact on health, an issue still relevant today. Despite these changes, many Victorian sleep traditions endured. Warm milk remained a popular comfort, and music's soothing role expanded with the advent of radios, allowing families to enjoy melodies without live musicians. The idea that environmental factors and routine-shaped sleep habits gained wider acceptance, laying the groundwork for modern sleep hygiene. Historians still argue how much early pharmaceutical interventions improved sleep quality versus fostering dependence or side effects. The tension between natural remedies and chemical solutions highlights enduring debates about medicalization and wellness. Socially, the 20th century also saw growing attention to psychological causes of insomnia. Sigmund Freud's theories and the rise of psychoanalysis introduced new ways to think about sleep disturbances, emphasizing dreams and unconscious processes. This shift complemented the Victorian focus on nerves and moral health, but added a fresh dimension to understanding sleeplessness. You might appreciate that, even amid innovation, the gentle, comforting practices of the Victorian era, warm drinks, soothing music, bedtime stories persisted, evolving but never disappearing entirely. So tonight, as you drift toward rest, you're straddling a historical moment where old meets new, where tradition and science entwine, offering a richer palette of ways to welcome sleep. Here you are, wrapped in the quiet of your room, the day's noise fading like a gentle tide retreating into the past. The comforting ritual of warm milk, the faint echo of lullabies, and the whispered stories of Victorian nights mingle softly with your own breath and heartbeat. It's remarkable how these simple traditions, born of an era so different yet so like our own, have lingered through time, shaping how we prepare for sleep even today. The legacy of Victorian insomnia remedies lives on in many subtle ways. Warm milk remains a familiar comfort drink, its creamy warmth a sensory cue that the day is ending and rest is near. Music still plays a crucial role in bedtime routines, from lullabies sung to children to playlists curated for adult relaxation. The gentle art of creating a calm, welcoming sleep environment echoes Victorian concerns with lighting, temperature, and sensory comfort. Modern sleep science continues to explore and validate some of these old practices, while also recognizing their limits. We now understand the complex neurochemistry behind sleep and insomnia. Yet the power of ritual and environment remains undeniable. The Victorian blend of science, superstition, and heartfelt care reminds us that sleep is both a physiological need and an emotional sanctuary. You might find it soothing to know that, across centuries and continents, people have shared this universal challenge, seeking rest amidst the noise of life, and have found ways, however humble, to nurture calm and invite dreams. Tonight, you join that timeless procession, cradled by traditions old and new. So as your breath deepens and your thoughts soften, let yourself be carried gently into sleep. Remember the Victorian nights filled with warm milk's promise and music's lull, the tender rituals crafted to soothe weary minds. May these echoes from the past wrap around you like a soft shawl, ushering you into peaceful rest. Good night and sweet dreams.